Chicago is one of the best cities for public transit in North America, and it's arguably the best in the US outside of New York City. However, for the past decade, transit in Chicago has without a doubt taken a turn for the worse. And that's not a controversial statement. Ridership for the most part in the Chicagoland area has been down, especially compared to other cities around the country, and it's even fallen below other cities in certain rankings, such as LA when it comes to total ridership of its transit system, and Chicago's metro system, the CTA L, falling behind WMATA's DC Metro in terms of ridership. So what's going on with transit in Chicago? And how can the city and its transit agencies recover ridership to the same numbers it had years ago, or even exceed previous ridership highs? Well, let's look at transit around the Chicagoland area. PACE is the suburban bus and paratransit division of the RTA being the agency that overlooks the vast majority of transit in the Chicago region. But PACE, like many other suburban bus agencies, remains fairly unforgotten and underutilized. Despite this, they do offer a ton of different routes throughout the Chicagoland region, as it is quite sprawling. The main issue that comes from PACE mostly has to do with their poor land use amongst the suburban sprawl. However, they have seen some ridership success by rolling out a more rapid, frequent bus service called the PACE Pulse, as well as running some suburban commuter express buses to help encourage ridership. PACE has a huge amount of area to cover as a bus operator and does an overall decent job of providing service coverage to the region. This does come at a cost though, with many of the bus routes operating half-hourly or hourly at best service, and most of the routes not offering service past 8 p.m. On top of this, a surprising amount of PACE lines don't offer any weekend service, or it's just limited Saturday service only. PACE, though, is only the tip of the transit iceberg in Chicago, so let's look a little deeper. Chicago's main regional rail provider, Metra, is pretty infamous for its fleet of incredibly dated gallery cars, some of which go more than 40 years back, and for being heavily addicted to running locomotives specifically from the manufacturing company EMD. Despite being known for their old rolling stock, Metra has started to make some very positive steps as of recent. For one, a bunch of their existing stations have been receiving wayfinding improvements, such as arrival screens on platforms, which were sorely lacking from their stations. Metra has also been in the process of replacing their dated gallery cars with new bi-level train cars from Alstom, as well as ordering some new Stadler Flirt DMUs to enhance service within certain parts of the network. However, Metra has faced some major issues with frequency on some of its routes that it operates on. This is mostly due to conflicts with the freight rail lines that they operate along these corridors, but then you'll have lines such as the BNSF, which offer no worse than hourly service on them 7 days a week, which is awesome, while lines like the NCS and Heritage Corridor get no more than 6 daily round trips on weekdays only. It's a major issue for ridership and consistency on the system. Just to note, Chicago also has another regional rail service called the South Shore Line, which is operated by the Northern Indiana Transit Commuter District and currently connects Chicago with Northwest Indiana. It has some issues with frequency on the line at the moment, however they have been engaging in some major projects to increase speeds between Chicago and South Bend, along with the future second line that will run to Dyer, Indiana. The South Shore Line has been making some major improvements over the past decade, but let's get into the transit that the city itself uses for the most part. Unless you're in New York City, your city's buses are going to be the backbone of a city's transit network, and this is no different for the city of Chicago. The CTA bus network spans the whole city of Chicago and a fair amount of the city's surrounding suburbs. While the network actually has some good coverage and an actual fair amount of express buses that serve transit gaps that the L and Metra have, the buses have two main issues that really hurt ridership on them. One of the biggest issues with the network is frequency. While there are some routes with better frequencies on them, most of the frequent routes in the city are unfortunately limited to frequencies of every 15 to 20 minutes at best. Now, for smaller cities around the US, this would be perfectly fine. However, this is Chicago we're talking about, the third biggest city in the country, home to over 2.5 million people, and running important bus routes every 15 minutes during rush hour in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods in the country is going to cause buses to get packed incredibly quickly. This is also seen with weekend service as frequencies are significantly downgraded on Saturdays and Sundays. On top of this, many of the bus routes suffer from heavy delays and bunching caused by a lack of priority. Chicago has a severe lack of bus lanes and lights with signal priority, causing buses to get delayed and reducing the reliability of the buses within the city. While the city did engage in a project to help buses move faster in the loop with the Loop Link project about a decade ago, the problem is that these bus lanes don't continue outside of downtown and also lack bus lane enforcement. So a lot of the time, you'll see bus lanes with rows of cars parked in them, but do you know who will never park in the bus lane? My patrons, because they get benefits like their name in the credits, early access to videos, extra videos like my recent one on transit malls, and more. Did I mention you can become one for just $1 a month? The link is down below. But now let's get back into the video. I don't think there's any doubt that the L has massive aura for running elevated through Chicago. I mean, it's the reason why the center of downtown Chicago is called the Loop, but the L has been dealing with some serious issues that have made it significantly worse over the past decade. One of the most severe issues the system suffers from is without a doubt its slow zones. While they're in the process of fixing this, some branches such as the Forest Park Blue Line have significant amounts of slow zones that slow down operations on the L to a crawl. But this isn't the only issue. Another major issue that's been seen by the CTA L is ghost trains. These are scheduled trains that just never end up showing up. While some lines end up suffering less from ghost trains than other ones, lines such as the green, the orange, and the blue line suffer huge reliability issues from ghost trains. In a way to attempt to address the ghost train issue on the CTA L, the CTA ended up reducing frequencies on some of the lines to be able to adhere better to scheduling. However, this has reduced frequency on some of the Green Line branches to every half hour at certain portions of the day. Now, half-hourly service might be fine on regional rail or a suburban bus route, but this is a metro line in America's third largest city. The ghost train phenomenon is still seen by the CTA, as this is mainly a hiring and training problem. The CTA has a severe lack of L operators and unfortunately limits itself on how many new operators it can hire. These maintenance and operational issues are without a doubt the CTA-L's biggest problem, and these issues are critical to the success of the network. However, network-wise, there is actually a fairly large issue with the CTA-L. For one, the L has been in a state of managed decline for decades, with the network being larger and actually servicing more dense neighborhoods over a century ago. I'm sure residents of Humboldt Park would like their L line back, and I'm definitely certain people would love to take the Green Line down to Jackson Park again, like they were able to when it was built as the city's first elevated line over 120 years ago. Now, Chicago has always been a city that isn't afraid to take bold action to improve itself, and there's a lot that the region could do to make itself a less car-dependent metro area. So what actions could they take to improve? Well, let's start with more small and practical projects and work our way up to the more ambitious projects. There's no quicker way to improve a transit network than by improving its buses. The CTA absolutely needs to go wild and make sure that their buses can move fast through the city, and there's no better way to do that than with a ton of bus lanes and making sure that they can enforce bus lane compliance. While a majority of the routes in the city would be fine with just clear bus lanes, many routes in the network would benefit immensely from becoming actual bus rapid transit corridors with center running bus lanes. Streets like Michigan Avenue, Ashland Avenue, Fullerton Avenue, Madison Avenue, and 95th Street are all examples of streets in the city that would massively benefit from the creation of BRT corridors along them. PACE should also be taking similar action out in the suburbs, but should start focusing less on network coverage and more on providing direct, frequent service. Expanding the amount of PACE pulse lines would be huge for this, and using these pulse routes to serve service gaps in between metro stations and connecting more people to regional rail would be huge. But without a doubt, both agencies need to hire more drivers to reduce the occurrence of ghost buses and have the ability to increase frequency on routes. There's no way around it. The CTA has to begin hiring and training more people to operate their trains to reduce the amount of ghost trains. Transit needs to be reliable and do its best to adhere to its schedule, and there's really nothing worse to a transit agency than being known as unreliable. Outside of this, the CTA is working on some good projects such as reducing slow zones and quad tracking the rest of its most busy corridor, the North Side Main Line, which will be great for service. However, there's one incredibly ambitious project I think the L needs to take on, and that would be the creation of a new line. The last time the CTA added onto the L network was all the way back in 1993 with the opening of the Orange Line, and let me remind you, it's been over 30 years since America's third largest city has expanded its metro. This is absolutely unacceptable, as cities like Los Angeles and Seattle have been working to build out whole transit networks in this time, and it's time for Chicago to get a new line. But where? Well, why not just run a line down Western Avenue? For one, it's the longest street in the city and runs through many dense neighborhoods within it. On top of this, a Western Avenue L would connect multiple different CTA and Metra lines and stations for easy transfers around the region's transportation network. The CTA not only needs to hire and train more operators to reduce the current issues that the system is seeing, but to also be ambitious and expand transit to new neighborhoods and help the city become less car-oriented. Metra has long been infamous for just catering to the 9-to-5 suburban commuter, but as we know, the 9-to-5 is becoming less and less common, and transit is for more than just getting to and from work. Metra could really benefit from becoming more of a regional rail system that runs more frequent service throughout the day, and while some lines are really starting to get better at this, like the BNSF, many lines throughout the region still need off-peak and weekend service improvements if Metra wants to become more than just a typical commuter rail system. While I don't think Metra needs any more longer routes into the suburbs, as it does have a fairly extensive network by mileage, other than a train to Milwaukee. One project that would significantly benefit Metra and Amtrak service in the city would be to convert a fair amount of the system to be through running in downtown Chicago. This, however, would be a massive undertaking of rearranging services and making massive improvements and changes to the existing downtown stations. But to improve connectivity and service, it would be massively beneficial for the whole region around Chicago. There's an account called Starline Chicago over on Twitter that goes more into depth on this kind of undertaking, but the most comparable project to this would be the Center City commuter connection for SEPTA Regional Rail in Philadelphia. Chicago is the transportation hub of the United States, and it's well known as the city of big shoulders from Upton Sinclair's famous poem about the city. Chicago doesn't just need better regional transit, it deserves it. I grew up in the suburbs, and seeing the state of the CTA in recent years has been nothing short of disappointing, and hopefully the great people of the city can address these issues with the current operations of transit in the region to help the city and its suburbs become a less car-dependent, more transit-oriented city, and make Chicago a better place to live. But how do you feel about transit in Chicago? What projects or changes would you want the city's transit agencies to make? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I want to thank everybody who helped me make this video, and I especially want to thank Tony Stunts and all of my other patrons who help make these videos possible. Not only are these lovely people helping me to support the content that I make, but also they get benefits like their name in the credits, early access to videos, extra video content, and more. And if you want to become a patron, the link is down below. Also, while you're down there, feel free to check out my other links, including my other socials, my Discord, and my podcast. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Your support is greatly appreciated. And as always, I'll see y'all on the next one.